In space, no one can hear you scream. Alien wasn't just a sci-fi horror film. It was a spaceship-bound nightmare factory. It wasn't simply about a monster lurking in the dark. It was about the machinery of fear, industrial isolation, and the unexpected cost of making what looked effortless. On the surface, the crew of the Nostromo drift calmly through the void. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted, from actors sweating in suits without ventilation to colossal set pieces groaning under the weight of ambition. From unannounced grotesque insertions into the script to studio executives uneasy about what they'd financed. Tonight, we pull back the curtain and peer into the dark guts of Alien's production. Here are 20 weird facts about Alien 1979 you likely never noticed, plus a bonus fact, lurking at the end. The monster emerged before the audience did. The chestburster scene wasn't acting, it was ambush filmmaking. Ridley Scott told the cast they'd be shooting a small effect that day. Only John Hurt knew the setup. Beneath a rigged table, technicians loaded a pressurized tube of fake blood and offal. When it exploded, chaos erupted. Veronica Cartwright screamed so hard she fell backward. Yaphet Kotto stormed off set, furious and shaken. The blood wasn't warm, but the shock was real. Cameras kept rolling as confusion turned to raw terror, the kind you can't rehearse. Scott later admitted he wanted the moment to feel like a birth gone wrong. It wasn't just a horror effect, it was a documentary of fear. What audiences saw wasn't performance, it was instinct, captured in a single unforgettable take. The budget had built-in anxiety. Alien looked like a blockbuster, but it was made on survival money. With a budget hovering near $11 million, Fox demanded miracles on a shoestring. Scott had just storyboards, not power to fight for detail. He reused parts of earlier sets, repainted steel panels from Star Wars, and begged for scrap from British studios. The Nostromo's grimy walls weren't a design choice alone, they were literally patched together from junk. Department heads shared the same anxiety. "We were building a cathedral out of cardboard," one recalled. To stretch every pound, lighting was dim, corridors were reused, and the camera lingered long enough to hide missing walls. What feels like moody minimalism today was creative desperation, then tension born from limitation. The budget didn't break Alien, it made its claustrophobia authentic. The director walked the corridors. Ridley Scott didn't direct from a chair, he stalked the set like one of his own creatures. Much of Alien's camera work came directly from his shoulder. He preferred moving through the ship's hallways himself, feeling the weight of the environment before each take. Cinematographer Derek Van Lint recalled, 80% of the film that's Ridley behind the camera. He'd crawl, duck, and tilt into tight corners, creating the unsettling intimacy of a documentary. The corridors were narrow and hot, cables everywhere, and Scott would whisper adjustments mid-shot. This wasn't control room filmmaking, it was trench warfare with light. His handheld energy made the Nostromo breathe, and his insistence on shooting long, silent takes built a rhythm of dread. Alien wasn't polished through distance, it was carved from sweat, breath, and motion. The suits were brutal. On set, space was suffocating literally. The crew's bulky exploration suits looked convincing, but they were torture devices under studio lights. Made of thick rubber with no internal airflow, each actor lost pounds of water per take. During the alien planet scenes, the temperature soared past 100 degrees inside the helmets. Children fainted. So did adults. There were nurses with oxygen tanks waiting between shots. Veronica Cartwright called them walking ovens. The condensation built so fast that visors fogged over seconds after action. Yet Scott refused to fake realism. He wanted to see steam, weight, exhaustion, the kind of struggle no actor could invent. The heat haze in those shots isn't lighting magic. It's human misery captured on film. Those suits didn't just look dangerous, they were. Giger's Alien was built from nightmares and bones. Swiss artist H.R. Giger dreamed in nightmares and built them in latex. His design for the xenomorph fused bone, sinew, and mechanical precision, a thing too perfect to exist. To create it, he combined parts of snakes, vertebrae, and an actual human skull beneath the translucent dome. Organic meets industrial, he said. Life and death as one. The creature's elongated head came from his fascination with ancient fertility idols and aircraft engines. Beauty turned grotesque. Giger airbrushed the costume himself, spending nights in the studio adding texture by hand. When the lights hit, the alien didn't shimmer like rubber, it pulsed like skin. His creation blurred anatomy and machine, life and survival, without a single digital pixel. It wasn't just a monster, it was the subconscious of mankind given form, elegant, merciless, unforgettable. The derelict set nearly collapsed. The derelict spaceship interior, one of cinema's most haunting environments, almost became its own disaster zone. Built across 3 sound stages, it combined plaster, steel, and latex stretched to sculpt alien architecture. The structure sagged under its own weight. Technicians reinforced it daily with hidden scaffolds. Smoke machines filled the air until visibility dropped to feet, and heat lamps warped the resin walls. Crew members wore masks to avoid chemical fumes. It smelled like burning plastic and death. One grip joked, only half kidding. When Ridley Scott crawled through the tunnels with his camera, the set moaned like a living thing. The claustrophobia you feel watching Alien wasn't simulated, it was shared. The set didn't just contain the film's terror, it embodied it, threatening collapse with every take. Studio executives freaked out. 20th Century Fox didn't quite understand what they'd bought. Early test screenings left executives pale. One reportedly asked, "Is this even science fiction?" The tone, slow, grim, industrial, defied expectations. They'd wanted another Star Wars, not a dark, unsettling fable about corporate survival. When the chestburster sequence played, half the boardroom looked away. Yet Ridley Scott refused to cut it. He told them, "Fear needs time to breathe." The tension between director and studio grew until the film's first preview, where audiences screamed, fainted, and applauded. Overnight, the executives reversed course. What they'd feared as too weird suddenly looked revolutionary. The lesson was brutal but lasting. Sometimes the thing that terrifies the suits is exactly what audiences crave. Alien didn't please the studio. It frightened it into success. The computer monitors were ancient tech in disguise. Every blinking light aboard the Nostromo hides a secret. They weren't futuristic at all. The production reused decades-old CRT monitors and oscilloscopes scavenged from decommissioned aircraft. Art director Roger Christian coated them in grime and wires until they resembled industrial relics from a working ship. "We wanted it to feel used, not invented," he explained. The display graphics' flickering code and random green waves were improvised loops of text, manually triggered by crew members off-camera. Some were so unreliable that they'd shut off mid-take, forcing reshoots. Yet that imperfection became charm, a tactile, analog realism. This wasn't sleek science fiction, it was a workplace, dirty, mechanical, barely holding together. The future in Alien wasn't aspirational, it was corporate decay, still running because nobody could afford to replace it. The soundtrack sparked conflict. Composer Jerry Goldsmith's music defined tension, but its birth was anything but harmonious. Goldsmith envisioned a sweeping, almost operatic score, grand themes for isolation and fear. Ridley Scott, however, wanted restraint, something primal, dissonant, unsettling. Their collaboration soured when Scott replaced key cues with temporary music from other films. Goldsmith was devastated. He later said, "It wasn't what I wrote, but it worked." Ironically, That mixture of original and borrowed sounds gave Alien its eerie, fractured identity. The strings quiver, the horns gasp, silence dominates. Goldsmith's theme may not play as he intended, but his fingerprints linger in every uneasy note. It wasn't just disagreement, it was creative collision that produced one of cinema's most haunting soundscapes. The silence between those notes? That's where Alien lives. The egg chamber's glow was a happy accident. That ghostly blue mist around the alien eggs wasn't designed in pre-production, it was borrowed light. A nearby Rock Band testing lasers at Shepperton Studios offered to lend them. The beams scattered through the fog and bounced off the slime, creating a hypnotic shimmer. Ridley Scott instantly ordered cameras to roll. It transformed the scene from eerie to otherworldly. That light made the space breathe, he later said. It wasn't CGI, it was a chance meeting creativity. The technicians struggled to keep the mist density consistent. Every take looked slightly different, but Scott loved it. That accident became visual identity. The alien egg chamber didn't just feel alive, it was alive, responding to every flicker of light and breath of fog. The face hugger was almost much larger. Early drafts of the creature design envisioned the face hugger as enormous a spider, the size of a dog that smothered its victim completely. H.R. Geiger's sketches show elongated limbs and small eyes that watched its host even while attached. But when the prop team began construction, they realized it was impossible to film at scale. It wouldn't cling properly to an actor, and the movement looked comical. The redesign shrunk it to hand size, making it more plausible and intimate a parasite rather than a predator. Giger kept the translucent texture and ribbed underbelly, ensuring it still looked disturbingly biological. Ridley Scott loved the change, saying the smaller version felt violating, not attacking. What started as a monster became an invasion metaphor. By downsizing the horror, they magnified the fear proof that terror works best up close. The planetoid was built indoors and nearly killed the cast. The stormy landscape of LV-426 looks like the edge of eternity, but it was actually a sweltering indoor warehouse filled with sand, fiberglass, and smoke. Ridley Scott shot it at Shepperton Studios, where the heat from the lamps made temperatures soar past 100 degrees. The alien wind was just massive fans blowing powdered rock, which got in everyone's eyes and lungs. To exaggerate the planet's scale, Scott cast his own kids in miniature suits for long shots. It was like a war zone, one crew member recalled. The entire scene feels desolate and cold, but behind the camera, people were fainting from exhaustion. The irony was brutal. To simulate deadly cold, they created deadly heat. It wasn't special effects that made LV-426 terrifying, it was endurance. The lawsuit that lurked behind the camera. Even as Alien terrified audiences, a legal monster stalked Fox's offices. Science fiction author A.E. Van Vogt claimed the film copied ideas from his 1939 short story, The Voyage of the Space Beagle, in which a hostile organism infiltrates a spaceship and reproduces inside its crew. The similarities were undeniable: the corporate mission, the parasitic threat, the sense of cosmic doom. Lawyers circled for months. Eventually, Fox settled quietly out of court. They paid Van Vogt's representatives an undisclosed sum, avoiding public embarrassment. The case never reached trial, but it left a mark on studio contracts. From then on, Alien sequels were carefully vetted for originality. It wasn't just about ownership, it was about authorship of fear. Even nightmares, it seems, have copyrights. The acid blood ate through the set, literally. When the crew first tested the acid blood effect, the aliens' defense mechanism, they had no idea how corrosive it would be. The practical team mixed sulfur, smoke powder, and ammonia to achieve the sizzling reaction. During the first take, it burned through the fake decking and left scorch marks on the studio floor. Technicians scrambled to contain it, while Ridley Scott reportedly shouted, "Keep rolling!" They later switched to safer compounds, but the residue permanently stained part of the Nostromo set. What's shown on screen, the dripping, hissing ooze, wasn't entirely an illusion. It really destroyed what it touched. The aliens' biology wasn't CGI trickery or metaphor. For one day on set, it was pure chemistry doing its thing, and it left scars behind, both on the floor and in memory. The marketing campaign hid the monster. When Alien's first trailers dropped, audiences never saw the creature, not even for a second. That wasn't oversight. It was a masterstroke. 20th Century Fox's ad team, uneasy about the film's extremity, decided to focus entirely on mystery. The tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream," appeared over abstract images of eggs and shadows. It told viewers nothing and everything at once. Ridley Scott supported the choice. Fear works best when you don't know what's coming. The absence of the monster became its own hook. When audiences finally saw the xenomorph on screen, it felt like forbidden knowledge, something too dreadful to advertise. The campaign redefined horror marketing for decades. Sometimes what you don't show becomes the most unforgettable image of all. The title sequence was designed to unsettle you. The opening credits of Alien are deceptively simple, fragmented letters slowly forming the word ALIEN. But that minimalism was psychological warfare. Title designers R.U. Azure Greenberg Associates created it to generate subconscious unease. Each stroke of each letter fades in like a coded message, as if something is assembling itself piece by piece. The negative space between the lines was intentional, forcing the audience to read Alien before it fully exists. The team called it linguistic dread. Coupled with Jerry Goldsmith's eerie opening note, it set the tone before the first scene even appeared. The entire title sequence cost less than $5,000, a small investment that paid off in immortality. Before we meet the creature, before the ship, before Ripley, the typography already tells us, this film will consume you letter by letter. John Hurt. Almost missed the movie entirely. John Hurt's haunting performance as Kane, the first victim, almost never happened. Originally, actor John Finch was cast in the role, but 2 days into filming, Finch fell seriously ill, forcing production to halt. Ridley Scott scrambled and convinced John Hurt, who had just returned from another project, to join immediately. Hurt flew in overnight and began shooting the next morning without rehearsals. The change altered everything. Hurt's frail intensity turned Kane from a routine crewman into the film's tragic heartbeat. His shock in the chestburster scene, both real and acted, became legend. Sometimes the best casting isn't planned, it's crisis-driven. Without that twist of fate, Alien might never have had its defining moment or its soul. The illusion of scale was a family affair. To make the Nostromo appear gigantic, Ridley Scott employed a clever optical illusion. For wide shots inside the ship, he dressed his two sons, ages 8 and 11, in miniature spacesuits and had them stand near the landing gear. The reduced human scale made the set look titanic. They were terrified but proud, Scott later said. The trick saved the production from building larger models and added subconscious weight to every scene. Combined with low-angle lighting and fog, the ship seemed infinite. It's one of the oldest effects in cinema forced perspective, yet Alien used it so flawlessly that few noticed. Those astronauts walking under the ship weren't adult explorers. They were children helping their father make history. Behind every illusion, there's often something surprisingly innocent. Ripley was originally written as a man. In the early drafts of Alien, the entire crew was written without specified genders. The script's note read simply, "The crew is unisex. Roles are interchangeable." When casting began, Producers leaned toward an all-male lineup, but Ridley Scott saw something different. He reimagined the lead Ripley as a woman, arguing it would make her triumph even more unexpected. Sigourney Weaver, a relative newcomer, won the role and changed cinema forever. She wasn't written as a female hero, she was written as a human survivor. The shift transformed how Hollywood saw strength, not brawn, but endurance, intelligence, and will. What began as a neutral line in a script became one of the most influential casting decisions in movie history. Ripley wasn't born from gender politics. She was born from equality, and she redefined it. The film's success nearly died in accounting. Despite grossing over $100 million worldwide, Alien was initially reported by Fox as a financial disappointment. Creative bookkeeping. Hollywood accounting, as insiders call it, buried profits under inflated costs. Ridley Scott and the producers were stunned. It took years for them to see real residuals. "We made a global hit," one crew member said, "and the books said we made a ghost." Yet the film's cult grew. Reruns, VHS, and sequels proved its longevity. The studio that once feared Alien's weirdness now depended on its success. Ironically, the same corporation that exploited the Nostromo's crew in fiction mirrored it in fact. The workers bled. The company profited. Maybe that's why Alien still feels real, because the horror behind the scenes was corporate, not cosmic. So, there it is. Alien wasn't just a movie. It was a crucible of sweat, fumes, and genius, forged inside a studio that never expected history. Every scream, every shadow, every metallic echo hides a story of risk and invention. When you watch it again, remember, the terror wasn't just scripted, it was lived. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like, subscribe, and share your favorite Alien fact in the comments. After all, fear still lives in the dark.